welcome to hour 2 of our program. On the line with us is our buddy Phil Ittner, the veteran war correspondent based out of Kiev, Ukraine, host of the On the Edge podcast, available wherever fine podcasts are found. Also on YouTube, he has a video blog, Philip Ittner, and his Twitter handle is IttnerPhilip. And Phil, welcome back to the program. I see that Russia has launched a counterattack in Kursk. Do I have that right? And I heard on NPR this morning some concerns that the Ukrainian incursion into Russia was designed to cause Russia to siphon assets away from their attacks to the north in Ukraine. But apparently Russia's not doing that. They're not slowing down at all. What's the state of the war right now?
Well, yeah, we are getting reports from Russian sources. A general, apparently, having spoken to the Russian news agency Ittner, claiming that they were advancing and retaking several villages and settlements in the western part of where Ukraine has made their incursion into the Russian Federation. Unconfirmed at this point, but a lot of chatter about it. Certainly that's a priority for the Russians to push the Ukrainians out of Kursk Oblast. We'll have to see, because we also do know from this side of the equation that the Ukrainians have been digging in. They are making defensive lines, intending clearly to fight for the territory that they've seized. So we shall have to see. As far as what is happening here internally within Ukraine in those occupied territories in Donbass, the word we're hearing is that the defense of a town called Pokrovsk, which is this kind of, it's a link area for a couple of different roadways. That they have been stopped, that the Russians have been stopped outside of Pokrovsk. They'll keep going for it, no doubt, because they are determined to seize it, apparently even on orders by President Vladimir Putin himself. So we'll have to see whether or not they'll be successful in taking that town. But for now, according to a number of different sources and open source intelligence, it does look like the Russians have been stopped in Donbass. The war is, again, one of these things where it looks like it is really hard going, no matter what front line you're looking at. But nobody is making enormous sweeping movements or, taking huge mile after mile land grabs. And we've only got about another 2 months, maybe, before the really heavy weather sets in, and fighting won't stop, but it'll certainly slow down, and those lines are unlikely to make any vast changes once winter does settle in. So we'll have to see.
Well, and when winter settles in, I mean, Russia has destroyed about half of the electric generating capacity of Ukraine so far. They've gone after, the fossil fuel stores as well. You're going to have a lot of cold people, I'm guessing, this winter. It's going to be very, very difficult.
It is. And, right now, the electrical grid is relatively good. We had a blackout earlier today, but it was the first one I've had in 2 days, which for us is a pretty good, significant achievement. It's an improvement. And then, Secretary of State Blinken was here this week, and one of the things that it's notable that one of the things or the package that he came with included an awful lot of equipment for civil engineering to reinforce the electrical grid. It was this package that he delivered in his meeting with President Zelensky. While it did include military assistance and backed up the assistance already promised, it further promised these things for civil engineering and electrical generation. So, yes, the anticipation in Ukraine is that this is going to be a very difficult winter. But they are very resourceful, these Ukrainians, and they're going to do everything they can to try and maintain it. And they've become real, true experts in getting things back up and running as quickly as possible when they've been hit.
Yeah, which raises another question. Blinken was over there. I understand one of the European foreign ministers was with him or was in the neighborhood as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
the Brit.
Yeah, there you go.
The British.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Keith Starmer, is that his name? Keir?
No, that's the Prime Minister.
Prime
This
Minister.
is Lammy, a guy by the name of David Lammy.
Thank you. Okay. And I know that one of the big asks of President Zelensky is, may we please use your weapons to attack within Russia to take down, these bombers when they're about to take off to come blow up our country. And so far, they've been forbidden from doing that. Any movement on that? Any word on that? Is that the sort of thing that would even be announced?
Well, this is an interesting topic of discussion that we should have, because we've already talked about the lines on the map, but we're looking also at a development on with both militaries in terms of what they're going to be able to do with attacking long range at one another. Ukraine has long wanted to be able to strike deep into Russia, into the airfields where these fighter bombers are taking off. What they'll do is they take off, they come into either their own airspace or occupied airspace in eastern Ukraine, and then they will drop a munition, either a cruise bomb or these glide bombs that they have with enormous warheads, and then they'll circle back and go into Russian airspace if they didn't launch from Russian airspace itself. Obviously, for Ukraine, this is unacceptable, so they want to be able to fire into Russian airspace to knock those fighter jets out before they're able to drop their munition. It also will then force Russian infrastructure and their bases and their command and control and logistics. That will have to be pushed back, because that will come under fire. They've been very frustrated with the restrictions. While bombs are dropping on Ukraine daily and people are dying in very tragic circumstances, Ukraine being unable to defend itself and shoot. Russians can shoot into Ukraine, but Ukrainians can't shoot into Russia is kind of what makes them so frustrated. But it does look as though we're getting very close to that. The British have the Storm Shadow cruise missile, and they're already here. We could extend the range of what's called our ATACMS artillery system, so that could go deeper into Russia. Those things, it does look, might be coming imminently, and the Ukrainians will put it to good use almost immediately. Now, on the other side of the equation, we have Iran giving a whole bunch of missiles to the Russian military. Now, these aren't long-range missiles. They're short-range missiles to be probably used on the battlefield, or potentially, if they can fire from Belarus, they could hit, maybe even Kiev. These are not long-range missiles. However, by giving them these missiles so that they can use it on the battlefield, that frees the Russians up to use their longer range missiles to actually hit targets deeper in Ukraine, Kiev included. These Iskander missiles. If they are able to use these shorter range Iranian things on the battlefield, the fear is that they will start sending Iskander, which are kind of like Scuds for those of us who went through the Persian Gulf War. That will have sufficient distance and a very large warhead to start hitting with increasing, regularity into the capital, or even places like Lviv or Ivano-Frankivsk or Lutsk in the far west, which has kind of been a haven. So there's a change happening on both militaries in their capacity to do, to cause harm to one another. The difference being, of course, all that's needed for the Ukrainians is just a green light.
Yeah, I get that. That said, though, it was reported earlier this week that there was a major attack on Moscow itself from Ukraine using homemade Ukrainian drones. What can you tell us about that?
Well, yet again, another example of Ukrainian ingenuity. They have apparently debuted a drone that has a much longer range and has other certain improvements, like apparently a turbine at the end of it approaches its target with a propeller, basically like a remote controlled drone, like any other drone. But then once it gets close to its target, it gets a speed boost so that it's harder to knock down, and it hits with much more ferocity. To strike within Moscow itself, obviously, is going to undermine Putin's promise to maintain stability, certainly in the capital. But also, we also heard that recently, I think within the last 36 hours, it was that an airport in Russia's Arctic north, in a town called Murmansk, which is on the Arctic, it's on the Arctic Ocean, that it came under air raid alerts, because apparently as far north as Murmansk, potentially now Ukraine can hit Russia. So there's just so much going on that's changing every day. But it is that dynamic in the air, the drones, the missiles. It's who can hurt who most from the farthest distance. And right now with the drones, it looks like Ukraine is in the lead. But depending on how many of those Iranian missiles they received, the Russians could start pounding the city.
Those are really brute force devices. We just have 30 seconds. We just have 30 seconds left. We're talking with Phil Ittner on the Edge podcast. Phil, what are your thoughts on the possibility of this war expanding?
It's always a concern. When Blinken was here and Lammy was here, they were saying Iran giving these missiles is an expansion. Yeah. The Russians are always talking about red lines, and are we going to cross a red line and then this thing expands? We know that there was a drone, for example, in Romanian airspace just recently, and instead of shooting it down, they even kind of gave it an escort because they don't know the consequences of shooting down a Russian missile. So it's very dangerous. And the idea of trying to keep this contained is what we talk about this Sunday, as a matter of fact, on the Edge with a European global security analyst. So it is cause for concern. But the idea right now is to keep it contained in Ukraine. The Ukrainians are saying we can contain it, but let us win it.
Yeah, I get it. Phil Ittner, the podcast is On the Edge. Check it out. Phil, thanks so much.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep, always good talking with you. We'll be right back.